Hey, it's Jessica DeMassa with WTF Health. What's the future of health? I am talking to the who's who of health tech and healthcare innovation. And today I'm chatting with Z Reitano. He is the co-founder and CEO of Row. And Z is here as our special guest as part of our series that we're doing with Wheel called the Virtual Care Regulatory Roundup. And so again, that's brought to you by Wheel, which is the health tech company that is powering the virtual care industry by providing other companies everything they need to launch and scale virtual care services. So Z, so good to have you here to chat all things big
Thanks for
picture.
having me. Big
I
fan of
know.
Wheel and Michelle over there. They're fantastic. So excited to be here.
Fantastic. We phoned in a favor. That's awesome. All right, so I want to pick your brain about like kind of what's going on with the virtual care market from a real macro perspective, because I feel like your company Row is one of the standout examples of a company that really started out with virtual first care. I mean, you guys really started out, in that pharmacy space, virtual pharmacy, providing virtual visits and helping people, get the kind of care that they needed that maybe they didn't feel comfortable going to a doctor for. So if it was ED or maybe hair loss, skin problems, things like that.
Yeah.
And then you guys have expanded into fertility testing now, a bunch of different things. And you have, National Doctors Network, National Pharmacy Network, you're huge. So talk to me a little bit about the role that virtual first, what does virtual first mean to you over there at Row?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'll take a little bit of a step back and sort of share how we got here and sort of why we
Sure.
started in that way, because I think that'll make a lot more sense. Because to us, virtual is just, again, it's a tool to increase access to patients and make it more convenient for them. But I think and you talked about this, going direct to patients, or the way that we go direct to them, and the types of products and services that we offer. So and I can tell sort of this part with a smile on my face, but growing up, my dad saved my life, and he saved my mom's life, and he saved my sister's life. He saved his own life. He was a physician, and we all were doing better now, but we all had some life-threatening illness at some point in time. And growing up, whenever we had a question, we would go to him. He would solve it from beginning to end. And we often joke that our house was more like a doctor's office and our closet more like a pharmacy. But the biggest, I think, insight that I had, and that many who grow up around healthcare providers have, is that when your dad is your doctor, yes, they care about your health, right? They want you to be healthy, but they do so because they want you to live a happy and fulfilled life, right? They care about your health in service of your life goals, right? And the healthcare system is not really structured to allow patients to achieve their goals, right? It is very system centric. It's either based around institutions, as you talked about, so health systems, insurance companies, PBMs, or it's, I would say, provider or specialty centric. So, cardiology, endocrinology, whatever specialty that someone has. And the thing that does is it places a tremendous burden on the patient to navigate who they need to see and what capabilities they need to solve their problem, right? It's not very patient centric. And so what we are building at Row is this concept of goal-oriented healthcare. We're actually, in the way that I did with my dad, right? Patients come to us and they say what they want to achieve, right? I want to lose weight. I want to have a child. I want to improve my mental health. I want to improve my skin. I want to have better sex, as you talked about, all the things that are important to them. And then we help them from beginning to end in the most convenient and effective way possible. We've built a lot of the core components that we vertically integrated those components that we believe are most crucial to deliver that. But for us, I think what virtual allows, tremendous convenience, tremendous access, but it allows us actually to change the way that patients start their relationship with the healthcare system, far more centered around what's important to them, what they want to achieve. And then it's on us to put together whether they need a doctor, a pharmacy, lab, or a combination, sort of an intricate combination between those at different points in time to help them get to the outcome that they want and that they need. And so I think that virtual care and this massive explosion of it, and I think over the last 2 years, what we've seen is people and we've seen the healthcare system respond to the need of it, right? First, it was, largely it was because the pandemic hit and people sort of needed to access the healthcare system that way. And I think that genie is out of the bottle and going to be very difficult to put back in. And I think we see patients responded so well to it, and people saw the tremendous opportunity behind it, that it's far more now out of want. But yeah, we can dive into all those. But I think that sort of that upbringing and that insight around really helping patients achieve their goals and starting with what is most important to them has dictated a lot of our decisions and insights since then.
I love that. And I think, I mean, your thesis is direct to patient care. That's the model that's coined. And I love that. And I think to me, that really, I think captures the power of virtual in terms of reshaping the customer journey and making it much more focused on, this is what I want to achieve, and this is what's convenient, what's accessible for me. I'm wondering, Z, because I know I only have you for a short period of time, if you can pivot and talk about the business side of it. So, I mean, this is where I love your story and the story of Row, is because, like I said at the beginning, you guys are a virtual first company, and you always have been. During the pandemic, I think we saw a lot of healthcare organizations just kind of like rip out and replace, like instead of coming in person, like here, we're doing this virtually now. And then now in the aftermath of this, they've got the technology is in place, but we're still seeing a lot of healthcare organizations try to figure out the business model around a virtual first care model, or even like an all virtual care model. What can we learn from you? Like, to tell us what you know about, like, where you think this is headed, or what are some of the ways that you at Row have been looking at building that business model around virtual first? And I know you guys have been really focused always on helping like remove the cost from healthcare. And so talk to me about how virtual plays a role in that as far as you're thinking.
Oh, so many ways we could talk for hours here. Right? Like one of the best things about technology in the first place is that it can turn luxuries into commodities, right? It can give things that only rich people have access to, and it can give them to everyone. And I actually think there's no better example of that than, our iPhones. I think like one of the most beautiful things to me about technology is that the richest person in the world cannot buy a better cell phone than a billion people. It's impossible. And there's that, I think, is the combination of amazing technology, right? Compounding, people building on top of previous inventions, as well as the right incentive structure for the right stakeholders. And I think what's really interesting about, if you look at the best healthcare in the world, right? The best healthcare in the world is far more like the healthcare that a lot of these startups have started, Row included, have started to build this concept of goal-oriented healthcare, right? The richest people in the world, where cost is not a limitation. Just talking about removing cost, I think is important. Like you start with where is the absolute best patient experience, where cost actually isn't even a factor. And it looks a lot like goal-oriented healthcare. They walk into a room, there's 8 to 10 doctors, they say what they want to achieve. I want to live longer, I want to have a child, I want to lose weight, I want to detect cancer, I want to prevent heart attacks, whatever it is. Right. And then they work to solve. And as we said, they structure and work to take on that complexity to solve it. So the question becomes, can a lot of these startups leverage technology to bring that to everyone? Right. Because there is probably, in my mind, there's no greater difference in the experience that someone has who has a median income than the richest people in the world than in healthcare. Right. We all, use Amazon and watch Netflix, and from entertainment to transportation, it's very, very, it's more similar than it is in healthcare. And so we have this amazing opportunity, as we have done, with countless other industries, but, I think the iPhone is an example. We have the opportunity to leverage technology to both increase the quality and decrease the cost, right? So it's like better, faster, cheaper across the board. How we end up doing that, I think that there's so many different models that I think great companies have shown thus far. Some of it is about removing middlemen, right? Some of it is about creating technology that replaces, the number of hands in the cookie jar, create a more complex system. They create more costs in the system. If you remove those, you can both pass on savings to the customer and value to the company who created that. We also see in a big way of virtual care, I think, and Wheel is a great example of this, and Row and a bunch of other companies, where they enable providers to practice at the top of their license, right? So they enable the right person at the right time to perform the right task. And in addition to that, they collect information when it is best for the patient and then display that information when it's best to the provider, right? At-home tests are a perfect example of that. That is a collection of diagnostic data that's occurring asynchronously. That can occur at the patient's home. They save a tremendous amount of time and money by not having to go in person. There's also not a healthcare provider that has to guide that process, right? So there's a tremendous amount there. People are filling out asynchronous online visits in the middle of the night. They're doing it at 9 a.m. They're doing it when they have a break. They're doing it on their way to work. They're doing it when it is most convenient for them. That information can be analyzed by technology. It can be reviewed, and then a provider can review it and look at it when it's most convenient to them. So I think there's the sort of initial like healthcare 1.0 of just connecting patients and providers in real time via video chats. That was sort of the first wave. But I think we're seeing a tremendous opportunity to increase the quality and decrease the cost with these virtual first companies that, again, right provider, right person, right time, right task, as well as collecting information when it is most convenient for the patient and displaying and actioning on that information when it's most convenient for the provider.
All right, I want to talk about constraints real quick and,
Sure.
and get your take on some of the constraints. So, oftentimes, especially now in this like getting out of COVID phase of life that we're in, people keep talking about some of the things that might go back to the way they were that were lifted during the pandemic. So state licensure, some reimbursement things, so on and so forth. Want to pick your brain about like some of that regulatory stuff that's around. And specifically, let's talk about state licensure because you guys operate nationally in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for those who might be thinking like, okay, virtual care, yeah, but you can't go across state licenses, or we have to keep this in the health system that's here in this state. What is your thinking about that? Do you think that those state licensing regulations are going to go back to the way that they were, or do you think that now that we're looking at this new kind of care and letting physicians practice at the top of their license, all of the good benefits of that, do you think that there might be a different way to look at state licensure and kind of remove that constraint in terms of providing virtual care?
I hope so. There's a lot, again, that you always ask fantastic questions. There's so much here. We could talk about this one for hours. Zooming back from
follow-up.
we need a follow-up. But from a first principle perspective, there are, if we just zoom out, there are too many people who need care and too few providers, right? And then when you layer on specialty, you layer on state by state licensure, you're cutting the supply of this incredible, highly trained labor force that is already in short supply, right? You're cutting down the supply even more, which makes that matching problem even more difficult, right? So, and do I think that the human body somehow changes when you cross state lines? I don't think so, right? I think it's far more akin to a driver's license. It should be far more akin to a driver's license than like a law license, let's say, because the laws far more different. Yes, there's healthcare laws that are state by state, but in terms of being able to provide a patient tremendous care. Now, the reason behind state licensure, which is probably at this point about 120 years old, makes sense. It's sort of a vestige of the past when there was very, very stark differences between the quality of medical schools in different states, right? So different states, in order to protect their own citizens, needed that. We have far more consistency and higher standards across our country. And so that original reason is less important than it is today. Having said that, state medical boards do need the ability and to have sufficient funding to protect the patients that live in that state, right? So who sort of oversees that and who regulates that? So if we can find a way where we can enable providers who might have a rare specialty or might have additional capacity, it's a capacity equation. If we can dramatically increase the capacity and therefore increase access for patients, that's absolutely a problem we need to solve. We also have to, I think sometimes when we look at these new things, we say, the state licensure makes no sense at all, and there's no reason why someone should pay $500 to $1,000 a year to have a license in a particular state. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I do know that it is far too difficult for providers to practice across state lines, to use their expertise to help more patients. We also need to make sure that we can protect patients and different states can maintain the bar that they've historically had. So I think it's far more nuanced. I'm hopeful that what the pandemic showed is that when we dramatically reduce the friction to providers practicing across state lines, we saw not a difference in quality of care, a massive increase in access, and a far better patient experience. So hopefully we can find a way to replicate that doesn't require a public health emergency. So I think there's hopefully a lot more innovation here to come.
All right, last question for you, and you can take this where you want, but I want to end on a higher note, not like a state licensure question.
Okay.
So tell me this, Z. I mean, I think that you're very forward thinking, and obviously you and the entire team behind you at Roe, very focused on the patient. Do you think that we've hit this point finally in the conversation about the healthcare consumer or the healthcare customer, where a model that is much more patient-led actually has the ability to gain some traction? Do you think the pandemic kind of turned the tide in that direction, or do you think that we're still kind of fighting that really system-centric view? I mean, paint me an optimistic picture.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say yes to both.
Okay.
Right. So I think we have had that, but I think we will continue to see resistance. I think one of the things that people haven't fully processed, or that we haven't seen also fully borne out from the pandemic, but I think has started, and we will see the cascading sort of ripple effect of this, is originally people were forced during the pandemic, where they hadn't been before, to start their healthcare journey online, right? Even if it ended up in person, they were forced to start it online. And I think now, after the pandemic, that is still people's initial impulse. Even if they want to see a provider in person, maybe now that provider allows them to book online, or maybe they look at reviews online, or maybe they start with a virtual first visit to see which provider and which specialty they actually need to see. What happens when there is a massive shift of where the beginning of the journey occurs, that sort of affords the opportunity for everyone after that to be disintermediated. And so I think if there are platforms like Roe that have served millions of patients, and you'll have others in different specialties across the board, if patients are starting their journey with us and that continues to increase, then we can help guide them in what happens afterwards. And if we have a patient-centric point of view, then I think that we can also raise the standard of where we guide people afterwards, and have the opportunity to disintermediate and really heavily influence the entire patient journey if we are the place that they turn to originally. That will take time, right? It'll take time for people to start those journeys. It'll take time for that full sort of cascading and compounding impact to follow through. But I think that the weight is definitely shifting, and the balance is shifting. I'm incredibly optimistic, and also because I think that people got a taste during the silver lining, right, of the pandemic. I do think people got a taste of what digital health and virtual care and direct to patient and all these different terms, goal-oriented healthcare, all these different terms that people have used. But ultimately, what it comes down to is that the patient was in more control of their health, right? And that people had to compete over what mattered most to patients. And patients got a taste of that. Now it's starting to unwind in certain areas, right? But the best thing, and most frustrating potentially for people who are building, but also this really beautiful thing about customers and patients, is that their standards and expectations relentlessly increase, right? 2 weeks to 20 years ago, we were happy with 5-day delivery. Now, if something doesn't show up in New York City in 15 minutes, you're frustrated. They would have to basically like pop out of the sewers and deliver you everything. But that's amazing, right? Because that competition leads to innovation. And I think we're starting to see the same type of competition and innovation that took place in all other aspects of our life, from finance to commerce, flow all the way through to healthcare. And I think the people who try to fight it, they might be able to do it for 3, 5, even 10 years. And I think one of the more unfortunate parts of that the last 20, 25 years is the majority of I think you have seen incumbents in healthcare, unlike other industries, capture a lot of the sort of upside. I think we see that in digital health. But I think that I'm very optimistic that the relentless increasing of expectations by patients will create a level of competition, and will create an investment in technology that will make all of their and our lives much better. And I think we're at the very early stages of that.
Awesome. All right. I'm glad you left it on a high. Thank you. We'll have to check back in with you, Z, and get a
Of course.
row update. I want to hear everything that's going on. You guys made some big acquisitions over the last couple of years, and I want to hear all that stuff is
Yeah, I would
starting
love
to
that.
merge together. So we'll have to chat again, and this time for a longer period of time, so I can get into all of the all of the big thinking.
Yes,
Well,
it'll
thank
be
you so
fun.
much for joining me here. I really appreciate
Thank
it. It's been a
you.
pleasure to just pick your brain. And I think it's important sometimes to step back and get out of, the this is what's going on in the business, but talking about these
Yeah,
macro trends. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me about.
absolutely.
Awesome. All
Of
right.
course.
Ziratano, everybody,
See
the
you
co-founder
soon.
and CEO of Row. We'll talk to him again soon. I'm Jessica DeMassa. Thanks so much for joining us. And for more interviews with those who are changing the way that we do healthcare, like Z, head on over to my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/WTF Health. Talk to you soon, Z. Bye.